Welcome to Bytes of Code. In this video we're going to be talking about loops. What are loops? How to use loops? There are two main loops in Python, for and while. Really quick, we're going to go down our code and kind of recap what we've learned so far. We're able to import libraries. Doing this can help us generate a random number. We get the user's input from the guess. It's just a user guess that we grab and put in a variable, but this is a string, so we convert it into an integer. This is newer. We have a Boolean to kind of remember, is the user wrong, is the user right? And also we're using a couple if conditions, one to check, make sure, hey, the user's right or the user's wrong. If they are wrong, we have a separate if condition area to tell them why. Actually right here we can say too low, too higher, yeah, too high, too low, TOO, because grammar. So let's talk about the different loops. Again, we have a for loop and we have a while loop. These are all lowercase, don't uppercase them. Let's do a for loop. Let's start with a for loop. We're going to make a string test. This is just going to equal something very simple, testing. How to use a for loop is the word for, F-O-R, then a space, your variable that you want to use. You can use X, you can use I, you can use FF, you can use my variable, whatever you want to use. That's your variable now that it will continue to use in the loop. For your variable in, and this is the actual variable that you have created already. In this case, it's string test or str test. We're just going to print my variable just to see what's going to happen. And we see here, welcome to guess my number, line number 3. Now we're in line number 8, going through the testing string. And we see that for every character in the string, we print out the character. That's what this is doing. So a for loop is a real shorthand kind of loop. It's a real efficient loop. If you have a list, we haven't really learned about lists yet, and we will in the next game. But if you have a list, then a for loop is very efficient to loop through every one of the items in the list. And maybe you're thinking, well, this is a string, it's not a list. Well, to Python, this also can be identified as a list of characters. That's why we're able to use it in this way. We could also do range. We could do range. Range is telling it, the loop, I want to go up to a certain area, a certain number, and then I want to stop. So this is a way to loop a fixed number, or loop a fixed amount of times. In this case, this is looping 3 times, and we can see that with what we've printed out. And maybe you're wondering, hey, well, I say loop 3 times, but it only says it's looped to number 2. And that's because this loop starts at 0, and that's something to remember in Python, that whenever you have a list or a loop, remember that really the true starting number is 0. So 0, 1, 2 is considered 3 loops. If we wanted the number 3 to show up, we would actually loop 4 times. 0, 1, 2, 3. That's 4 loops. Again, because we start at 0. So this is the for loop. What we're actually going to be using in our code is the while loop. A while loop starts with while. Not that while, this while. And it actually takes a condition just like an if statement. we're going to bring all this down because we're actually going to use this here. While we can say something very simple. While 1 equals, remember this is a comparison like an if statement. In this while 1 is equal to 1, which is true, this is going to be a true condition, so we're going to enter into this print statement. We're going to print while. The downside to a while loop, let's type in our number, is that it has the potential to run forever. And so right now we're printing this while and it's not stopping. We're in the while loop. And what happens after it finishes the while loop, it goes right back to the condition. It says, is this true? Is this condition met? If it is, then we're going to do it again. And then we're caught in an infinite loop. So especially when using while loops, be very careful that you're not putting yourself in a scenario where the condition will be met all the time. It will be result in an infinite loop. And as you'll see, the rest of the code, it won't work. We won't get to this portion of the code because we're stuck here. So how do we actually use a while loop in our game? We're going to do it with this flag, is correct. While is correct, is guess correct, is equal to false. So this is while the user has not guessed, that false is capital F. This is while the user has not guessed correctly. We want to do all of this code. So how to push this in the while loop is just an indent. How to push this in a while loop is just an indent. Now this code belongs to this parent, the while loop. At this point right here, the code is its own if statement. It doesn't have any parent. It doesn't belong to any other piece of code. But if we just push this with an indent, then it's now belonging to the while loop. So let's run our code and kind of just make sure that we understand. So we have a while loop. Is guess correct? Is guess correct is set to true, so we do have an area to break this while loop here. This is the only time that we will be able to break through the while loop. So we're kind of looking to make sure that there's no chance that this is going to be an infinite loop. Other than that, we need to make sure that we get to this area at some point. But right now in the current code, even though it looks like we would be able to get to the area, if we type a number, a wrong number, well, let's type a right number first. 46. We've guessed correctly, and the program has finished. So we guessed correctly. Is guess correct was true, so we stop the while loop. But if we type in the wrong number, we see that we are stuck in an infinite loop. So think about it. Why are we stuck in an infinite loop? Because it's important to read the code and understand why a problem is happening. And it's because even though this is an area that breaks the loop, there is no way to get to this area if we have guessed incorrectly. Maybe that's not making sense, so I'll just give you the answer right here. We need to put also this portion of code in the while loop, because there's no way for the user to change their guess. We want the user to be prompted again, give me your guess, type a number. So let's try it again. Let's see what happens. Is guess correct not defined? Okay, so I have used is guess correct before I have defined it. That's right here. Line 26 it was. is guess correct is not defined. This was telling me that, hey, you're using this variable, is guess correct, but it has no idea what it is. That's because I need to define it first. Now I'm doing it in Live 25 before I use it. So don't be afraid to have errors and read the errors. It's important to read an error to understand, because we will all get errors in our code. So let's type the right number again, make sure it works. And let's type a wrong number. 80. You have guessed wrong. So this is where we went into. You've guessed wrong. Too high. Please type a number. So now we know that we have gone into our loop. We've asked the user again, give me another number. Let's try 77. Guess wrong, too low. Please type a number. Let's guess 78. You have guessed correctly. So this is now the actual game. We are able to get the user to guess and continue to guess, telling them, is it too high or is it too low? One last thing that we're going to learn about, because we don't want the user to guess forever. We want them to lose. We want the user to know that they have guessed incorrectly for a certain amount of times, and now they've lost. So we're going to make a variable times to guess. How many times do we want the user to guess? Let's just say 7. If they get it in 7 times, they win. If they take over 7 times, then we're going to tell them that they've lost. So we have 2 new variables, times to guess and the times user has guessed. For every time that we loop in here, every time that we enter a loop, we're going to do times user has guessed equals times user has guessed plus 1. We're just going to add 1. And a very short way to do this is we can do plus equals 1. So instead of saying times user has guessed equals times user has guessed plus 1, we could just do plus equal 1. And let's go and print it out. Let's print it out at the end. Print you have guessed So they're going to guess 78. You have guessed 1 time. Let's do 90. You have guessed 2 times. So we see a counter here. We're going up. We're able to keep track of how many times the user has guessed. Now the point is, in this while loop, we're going to say and times to guess is less than 7. Oh, I'm sorry. Times user has guessed is less than or equal to 7. And this is going to keep track. We'll see this now. This is going to keep track of the user guessing. So they've guessed 3 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, 8 times, and we've exited. So we actually don't want to do equal to. That was giving us too much, less than 7. So now we actually stop the user from guessing. We can collapse this while loop here. If we're having trouble like reading the code, what we can do is just minimize, I guess you can say, and collapse. So it says fold, I guess would be the correct term. And what we're going to do is just make sure that after the while loop, I want to have one very last if condition. If times user has guessed equals times double equals to guess and is guess correct equals false. So they're wrong. They have been wrong 7 times. We want to print. Wow. You lose. So let's try this out. We're going to get the wrong answer 7 times. After 7 times, we print this while you lose. Let's try it one more time. Let's get it like on the 7th time. We have guessed 5 times. We have guessed 6 times. So this is our last chance. We type in the right number. You have guessed correctly. You have guessed 7 times. So we'll stop the video right here. This is actually the Guess My Number game. We have a game that is able to give the user a certain amount of guesses, tell them it's too high or too low. In the next video, what we're going to do is just do a giant recap of everything from start to finish, line by line. We're going to cover over everything that we've talked about, and also we're going to do something a little fun. We're going to stylize our title, make it a little more game looking. So at this point, we're going to finish the video. I appreciate you taking your time to watch this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section, and I hope to see you at the next video.